Prologue. In the long declining years of the Third Galactic Empire, the Terran imperialists struggled to defend their interstellar borders against all encroachers, but the greedy ambitions of their own factions ultimately sabotaged the stability of their trade and civilization. Their stranglehold faltered. Intergalactic war broke out. The end became inevitable. For many, that self-destructive path had always been recognized, the downfall anticipated. Among those wiser peoples were the Council of Ten and De Sorormin. Separated by innumerable light-years and by varied resources, the two cultures had nonetheless become intricately entwined. Once, during the height of the Terran Empire's reign, the Council of Ten on Aggar had enlisted the aid of an Amazon from De Sorormin to prevent an intergalactic border war that would have annihilated Aggar's very existence. In exchange for that help, De Sorormin, the Sisterhood, had found themselves gifted with a daughter of Aggar who brought with her the blue sight. And as that precious gift of mystical powers spread against De Sorormin's descendants, the sight came to enhance the sisters' most cherished values of conscience and spirituality. So when the time of the Terran's imperial demise came, the Council of Ten again sought the aid of De Sorormin's Amazons. The sisters were angered at the injustice of Aggar's plight. No culture, no people deserved to be thoughtlessly eradicated by the feuds of their neighboring star systems. But Aggar was a metal-poor planet, without the resources or technology to defend itself. Caught in an endless era of steel swords, stone mortar, and glass kilns, their world was powerless against the careless whims of galactic politics. But De Sorormin was not. In a decision of conscience, a fleet of Amazons left their homeworld and answered Aggar's need. With them, they brought the technologies and raw materials for their battles. And they brought their families, their livestock, selected seeds and skills, as well as their values to Aggar. These sisters knew that the starry battling would be done only when the invaders succeeded, and the Terran's empire was destroyed. By that day, interstellar travel would be dangerously limited, if possible at all. The sisters knew they would not be able to return home. The Council of Ten had known this too. It is why they did what they could to prepare a welcome. As the quiet guides of Aggar's own conscience, the Council had urged the kings and merchants and common folk to embrace these honorable guardians, these daughters of the stars. And when the end of the Empire came, stranding the Terrans of the Aggar outpost and the Amazons of De Sorormin, the rulers of both the northern and southern continents welcomed the exiles. The Amazons were the first to accept the kindness, and they began to build their settlement north, in Valley Bay. But the Terrans balked at such patronizing charity. Instead, they clung to their base grounds jealously. The Amazons respected Aggar's precarious balance of technology and culture, carefully adapting and interacting with other folk, while still preserving their own ways of De Sorormin in Valley Bay. The Terrans hoarded their technical skills and resources, shunning the Remains Queen's offered assistance, shunning even counsel in matters of farming and lands. In Valley Bay, the sisters created their governing circle, much in the fashion of their homeworld's communities. 7 women were chosen. 6 of them varied in skills and wisdom. They formed the Ring. The 7th was selected from among the most talented daughters of the Blue Sight. She became their ring binder. Always powerful enough to reach into the stars, always possessing the rarer ability of out-of-time seeing, the ring binder literally bound Valley Bay's settlement to De Sorormin's homeworld. Stretching across the light years to that distant welcome, the blue-sighted daughters of Valley Bay and the blue-sighted daughters of home kept the ties strong, kept the harmony of De Sorormin alive and well in Valley Bay's descendants. The Terran encampment was not so blessed. In struggling to refute their isolation, in feigning to assert some sort of independence, they tenaciously held to their imperial ways. As their resources dwindled, they drew more and more upon their technological superiority. Even as they lost the skills to maintain or repair most of their machinery, they relied upon their weaponry to raid and pillage the neighboring trade routes. Eventually, the overland routes from the southern continent closed, as the merchants chose to sail ships rather than better arm their caravans. Time passed, and the daughters of De Sorormin became more and more a part of Aggar's soul. Trade and trust grew between the ring of Valley Bay and the Remain's royal families, as well as with the other folk of Aggar. The sisters lent the Council of Ten support in those gentle urgings for tolerances, and they lent strength to the royal courts against injustices. They opened their hearts and their homes to the women of Aggar, and the settlement of Valley Bay grew richer in its turn. The Terran clans found less and less prosperity, however. As the generations passed, they grew only more isolated and sullen in their grievances. Mistrusts grew between the Kirlan district and the clan folks. Anger spawned hatreds. Isolation spawned fears. Until, inevitably, the rising turmoil ignited a fiery violence. And once again, there was need of the Amazon's aid. Part 1. Dreams Yield. Awake. Chapter 1. The night was bright with thickly scattered stars, and the first moon was nearly full. From the eastern peaks, white and crescent-like, the midnight moon came to join her sister, and beneath their care the mountain stronghold slept. A breeze flitted down from the peaks above, dancing along the upper edges of one stony wall until it found a small arched window with the shutters tied open. Slender strands of moonlight slipped in with the breeze, and the dry, bitter chill in the dormitory room stirred. It was a long, stark room, with rows of heavily framed beds and leather-hinged chests. Slumbering figures huddled beneath furred skins and woolen blankets, safe from the late autumn cold. The night breezes whispered again. The woman nearest the arching window stirred and wakened. Ice-blue eyes, blurred by sleep, looked to a stone-slated hearth. Flickering, dancing orange flames leapt high, and the subtle smell of smoke drifted to her nostrils. An insistent knock drew her drowsy attention to the door beside the hearth, and to the torchlight that pushed through the ill-fitted planks. Urgency clenched her stomach, and adrenaline surged through her blood. At the door, the banging began again. What door? The icy-clear eyes blinked as the woman remembered there was no door to the left of their fireplace. The vision began to swim, drifting into pieces until the flames were swallowed by the empty cavern of the hearth. The wall stood dark now before her inquisitive gaze. She blinked again, and the remnants of the smoky smell were sent away. But the vision left a restlessness, a taunting lure of urgency that would not leave. She should not be surprised. The haunting dreams had come all too often. Through warm summer eves and harsh winter darkness, the teasing glimpses of that unnameable person had followed her across more than 2 10-moons. Now the call strengthened, and nearly every night she found herself wakened. Several beds away, someone shifted, then settled back into sleep, and the woman realized that her blue gift would soon project her uneasiness to everyone in the room if she was not careful. She would have to leave or concentrate on containing herself. She was not prepared to do the latter. She needed to think. With a stern calm clamped across her restless feelings, she tossed back the thick covers. Her skin was pale in the moon's light, and her small breasts grew hard in the coldness. Unmindful of the chilled stones underfoot, she hurried to her clothes chest. Soft tights of brown wool were donned, and an undyed linen tunic slipped over her head. A wooden comb tamed the length of her dark, curling hair, and the strands about her face were caught and drawn back to be bound by a leather thong. The soft hide of the indoor shoes slipped on easily, and the ankle laces were knotted. She noted the moonlight shimmering as it slid through the small window, The twin moons tempted her to use her gift more consciously, and to send her blue sight soaring through that window in search of the one who so persistently wakened her with these murky, indecipherable dreams. She resisted the temptation, knowing it would be in vain. She was a blue sight, but she was not trained as a seer. Her impatience grew. She snatched the light cloak from her chest and marched past the drapes hanging in the archway. The upper windows in the hall were open as usual, and beneath the moon's light her cloak twirled, settling about her shoulders as she fastened it. The fabric was useless against a winter's cold, but the snows were still many 10 days away. For now, it broke the occasional draught of the keep's passageways. She made her way through the maze of gray stone walls and tomb-like silence. Her stride was long and quick. Though she was tall for a woman of this planet, her tread was noiseless as she crossed the polished wood balcony above the hall. Then again the stone closed in around her. With a faint frown, she quickened her pace. Few of her world would call her an exceptionally pretty woman. Her features were neither fashionably plump nor delicately chiseled. Except for her height and the striking, almost translucent blue of her eyes, she was typical of countless young women of her planet, and the unusual color of her eyes could easily be hidden from a stranger by a trick of the cloak and sight, a special skill practiced by any who aspired to be a shadow, and who was also gifted with the blue sight. The tension in her expression eased as her own feelings usurped the urgent beckoning of the dream. Her own anger and frustration she could manage, but emotions of dream-spun visions were quite another matter. In truth, she was more annoyed by her inability to decipher the visions than upset by their constant appearance. But it did not appease her to remind herself that confusion was often the price of the blue sight. The gift that allowed her to glimpse the amarin, the flowing, hidden patterns of each life, often prevented her from understanding the reasons compelling such life into motion. It was as if she was so acutely aware of each glossy, green-barked tree that the edges of her mind could not define the forest as a whole. Still, after so many 10 moons of hauntings, she could have hoped for a breath more of understanding. Ahead, the glow of fires and torches sent huge, wavering shadows against the walls, and suddenly she hesitated as the grand hall opened below. Dozens of the keep's scribes, traders, and historians filled the hall. Scattered among them stood the robed figures of both the blue-sighted seers and the revered council masters. Kitchen pages darted about with hastily prepared platters of meats and day-old sweets. In the far hearth the mulled wine of decisions simmered, and the herbal, fruity scent of the liquor made her nostrils flare. She wondered if the wine's touch had somehow called up her own blurred sight, while these seers drank and sought visions. She hovered at the balcony above, searching the crowd for one robed figure in particular. "Here!" a voice snapped from behind. A woman, grown gray by countless 10 moons, closed a heavy door. Her black robe shifted as she adjusted its wide rope belt with fingers gnarled by age. "It always amazes me that so few hear when your mind shouts like that," the old mistress snorted. Then she relented some as she started down the steps. "What brings you from bed, Ilana?" The younger woman glanced up quickly. Her full given name, Ilana, was rarely spoken here. "I have decided that you are growing too old for such childishness as Ona," the mistress continued. "You have been with us for 9 of the 10 moon seasons. You are the eldest prepared." A dry laugh came. "If you had stayed with your parents, you would already be married to a smithy and have borne 3 children. 2, Ilana corrected fondly. "My parents would have waited until I was of age at 8 10 moons. A disbelieving humph came from the elder. "Ilana will be more fitting. Use it." "Yes, mistress." "Why are you up?" she repeated, leading the way to an empty seat beside a smaller hearth. "Surely this did not waken you so far away in the dormitories." A piercing gray eye suddenly examined the young face. "Unless you do not sleep these nights in your own bed?" Ilana assured her mentor. "I am still in my bed, alone." "Then?" "I was awakened." Ilana hesitated, wondering if her personal matters shouldn't wait until the dealings of the council were finished. "Vision stirred," the mistress murmured knowingly. A boy pushed by with a tray, and she halted him to confiscate drink for both of them. Ilana refused the food, and he left them as the old one sighed again. Certainly you were touched," she continued, almost to herself. "Why am I always so amazed?" She smiled and patted the strong, smooth hand. "You are the oldest of our trainees now. You have a maturity matching the best of any we have chosen as shadows. And you have the blue sight, with a basic skill that surpasses most of the seer's apprentices. I would be more surprised if you were not disturbed by your sight tonight." She nodded toward the figures gathered at the far hearth. "I fear this crisis our seers now speak of may involve more than the peoples of Aggar." The elders Amarin were strong, drawing Ilana's gaze to her face. Ilana asked, "The off-worlders? How could aliens be threatened by us?" "Humans, child, not aliens. These Terrans are as like us as our apprentices are like the council masters." A cynical smile turned Ilana's lips. "That is sometimes very little, no?" The mistress chuckled appreciatively. "Sometimes." Then more somberly she said, "We do not threaten the off-worlders. It seems they threaten themselves. But we of Aggar, I fear, are again being drawn in as pawns in their interstellar game." As pawns? Or as the Mother's own players? Ilana's heart pounded faster. Imagine a chance to turn the fates of whole planets. The magnitude of the idea enticed Ilana's very soul. But then her haunting vision surfaced again, and she knew the off-worlders' technology had not built the plank door she had seen. "The off-worlders' games are not what I saw, mistress." A thin brow lifted skeptically. "What did you see?" "The same woman I have always spoken of." Ilana gazed down into her wine cup. A face appeared in the ruby depths of the liquid, the face of the woman she had seen in so many dreams. "Only I did not see her. I saw with her tonight. Through her eyes I saw a hearth. Through her body I moved to reach the door. I felt her need for haste." The vision of the face dissolved in her wine, and she looked to the mistress again. With a warm clasp, she took Ilana's hand. "So, perhaps your destiny prepares to meet you. For you, this is more important than all the off-worlders' politics." "Such self-importance!" Ilana laughed. "No," the old mistress corrected her quietly. "It is neither selfishness nor pride. It merely is." Ilana absorbed the words slowly, and then, with a nod, she accepted them. The elder turned to the murmuring crowd around them. "In the meanwhile, as eldest of the prepared, you should stay for this. Even if you truly are not to play a part in their interstellar game, you may know of another trainee who should." "Perhaps so," Ilana agreed as a shadow fell across them. "I am glad you've deemed it fit to join us again, mistress." The master bowed, but there was a glint of humor in his dark eyes. He pulled a stool nearer the hearth and nodded to Ilana. "It is good to see you here as well." Ilana returned her teacher's nod, studying him with concern. He was tired. Lines were etched deeply around his eyes. His balding head drooped with fatigue. He and the mistress shared the duties of instructing Ilana and her peers in the preparations. The lure of the challenge, the striving for the undoable, was a desire he deliberately cultivated in all the trainees who sought to become a shadow. But tonight, he merely looked old. Despite his beliefs and his commitment to his planet's survival, he, like the mistress, had seen one too many challenges from the fates' jests. He clearly did not relish yet another one. Have they learned more? The mistress prodded, nodding to the seers that gathered about the far hearth where the wine of decisions brewed. Some, he admitted, and straightened. The man is indeed an off-worlder. His craft fell somewhere in the Multar's vast realm. Where he comes from exactly, why the crash? The master shrugged. The seer's visions do not say, but of the man himself it becomes clearer. His name is Garrison. He is skilled as an engineer as well as a pilot. His craft crashed at Darkfall this afternoon. He is alone. Some 10 moons ago it seems he was assigned to the Terran base, although he worked above on their refueling station. He never actually set foot to Aggar's soil. The mistress spoke suddenly. Do we know what sort of work the off-worlders were doing the season he was here? Perhaps he returned to complete something? The master historian has mentioned nothing, but the thought is intriguing. Perhaps we should send a runner to the vaults. The records should tell us. The mistress sighed as he wandered off on his task, and Alana turned as the old woman grasped her hand. I fear, the mistress muttered, it will be a long night.